Hello, you're watching the business headlines on HW News with me, Ali Azhar. A day after Narendra Modi was sworn in for his second term as Prime Minister, the government allowed the release of a long delayed and controversial report which showed that unemployment was at a 45-year high. The National Sample Survey Office, or the NSSO's job survey for 2017-18 had showed a massive spike and pegged joblessness levels at 6.1% for that period. Obviously, the government claimed the report was unreliable and said that it was based on a new methodology and could not be compared with previous years. Also worth mentioning is that CMI, a private data group whose data is considered more up-to-date and credible than government data, reported that India's jobless rate rose to 7.51% in the month of July 2019. The point being that in today's testing times, we live amid a highly uncertain economic environment in which job losses are a reality. And no sector echoes that sentiment more than the ailing automobile sector. At the risk of sounding like a broken record, slumping sales of cars and motorcycles are triggering massive job cuts in the auto and auto ancillary industries, with many companies resorting to shutting down factories for days and reducing their number of shifts in an attempt to save operating costs. However, the most worrisome statistic was that automakers, part manufacturers and dealers have laid off about 350,000 workers since April, according to a report by international news agency Reuters. To give you some perspective on the magnitude of the problem, India's automobile sector is not a small one, so one can't just brush aside its woes and ignore the repercussions. Distress in this sector will have a contagion effect and would spread to all corners of the economy. Just last week, continuous partial shutdowns of a big factory owned by Tata Motors in Jamshedpur led to 30 steel factories closing their doors in the same region. India has the world's fourth largest automobile market. The sector contributes 7.1% to the country's GDP and 49% of India's manufacturing output. Let's also keep in mind that it employs more than 35 million people directly and indirectly. So, when news surfaces that passenger vehicle sales have dropped for 9 straight months through July, with some automakers suffering year-on-year declines of more than 30% in recent months, it's a big cause for concern. Let's understand what exactly is contributing to the slump in this sector. First off, our GDP growth is at a more than 5-year low. So generally, economic activity is not conducive. The government claims we are in the midst of a cyclical slowdown and that things would pick up soon. However, we believe the slowdown is structural and not cyclical and would need policy intervention to reverse. Secondly, amid a liquidity crunch and a general skepticism to lend to the troubled auto sector, automakers, auto ancillary makers, dealers, suppliers, retailers, and final consumers like me and you are finding credit much harder to come by from financiers and NBFCs, adding to the problem. Thirdly, government policies have not been supportive to the industry. A sudden shift from BS4 to BS6 emission standards, axle load capacity norms, and a lax vehicle scrappage policy have all led to massive buildup of inventories, which manufacturers are unable to sell. Fourthly, the government views automobiles as sin goods and levies a 28% rate of GST on them. Not only that, abnormally high levels of registration fees, road tax, and cess contribute to making cars out of reach for many middle-class Indians. I mean, if you take a look at the price of cars in the US and Europe, we pay double of what they pay over there. And if you look at countries like UAE, we pay almost triple the price in India. The recent push for electronic vehicles or EVs and the reduction of GST rates from 12% to 5% on EVs is a step in the right direction. However, sales of EVs are so minuscule compared to other vehicles that a reduction in rates won't contribute to the industry as a whole. And that's because India has no infrastructure in place, such as charging stations, service stations, supply equipment, etc., to encourage demand for EVs as yet, and is not expected to do so for the coming decade. With that out of the way, I would now like to bring your attention to two important developments that took place yesterday. First off, auto industry leaders met with Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman and sought immediate government intervention to arrest the near collapse of the auto sector and job losses that come with it. This was the first time that industry leaders met with policymakers after the formation of the new government. Eminent leaders such as R.C. Bhargav, Chairman of Maruti Suzuki, Pawan Munjal, Chairman and MD of Hero Motocorp, besides heads of Mahindra and Mahindra, Toyota, Hyundai Motors, Volkswagen and others were present. From the government side, the FM, Arvind Sawant, who is the Heavy Industries Minister, and Amitabh Kant, who is the CEO of Niti Aayog, were in attendance. The automakers made a strong pitch for the reduction in GST rates from 28% to 18%, higher depreciation benefits, favorable policies, relaxation of credit facilities, and some sort of stimulus package. They also reiterated that increase in vehicle registration fees should not take place and stressed that the government should request banks and NBFCs to relax lending terms to the sector. They warned of job losses, and not only among vehicle manufacturers, but also component makers, suppliers, dealers, unorganized players, garages, equipment manufacturers, and even tire makers. The government took the suggestions of industry leaders into consideration and seemed genuinely concerned, according to one source. However, the hour-long meeting did not yield any concrete proposals. The other important development was that distinguished leader and chairman of Mahindra and Mahindra Limited, Anand Mahindra, made his views public and called for a reduction in taxes, among other things, to breathe life back into the auto industry amid the vicious slowdown. Speaking at his company's 73rd annual general meeting in Mumbai, Mr. Mahindra advocated short-term measures to catalyze consumption. He said that the most obvious and welcome first aid would be some sort of temporary relief on GST, either by modifying slabs or by removing cess. Another suggestion he had was for government to take a relook at the registration fees, which have gone up substantially, and a rollback of the increase in road tax. Mr. Mahindra conceded that he understands the government's hesitancy in implementing GST cuts, as the centre has to live up to their fiscal targets. However, he said, the auto industry contributes upwards of 1,80,000 crore rupees to the government treasury, and the current slowdown poses a greater threat to the financial arithmetic. He called the auto industry a living, breathing ecosystem that has economic and social repercussions well beyond the number of vehicles sold. He further went on to say that a revival of the industry would lead to revival of jobs and hence consumption, in a virtuous cycle that would get us closer to the $5 trillion economy, which is our common goal, he remarked. In addition, he also touched upon the importance of availability of finance and lauded the recent rate cut by the RBI and backed the government push for EVs. While Mr. Mahindra was selective with his words and did not give much away, other prominent leaders from India Incorporated such as A.M. Nayak and Adi Godrej were more vocal with their criticism. With another leader from the automotive world, Mr. Rahul Bajaj of Bajaj Auto, stating his displeasure at the situation when he said, "There is no demand, no private investment, so where will the growth come from? It doesn't fall from the heavens." Thank you for watching HW News. This is me signing off. Have a great day.
HW न्यूज़ पर आप मुझे लगातार देखते आ रहे हैं द विनोद दुआ शो में। अब आप मुझे एंड्रॉयड और आईफोन पर भी देख सकते हैं HW न्यूज का फ्री ऐप डाउनलोड करके। तो देर मत कीजिए, डाउनलोड कीजिए HW न्यूज का फ्री ऐप और मुझसे जुड़े रहिए।